I was doing lots of sessions with other people, and in 84, we were sitting, we were doing a gig, me and Jim, and Mike Cotton and Boat, all the whole lot, at a place called the Torrington, which was a very good gig in its day, and looked in the audience, and there was Ray. I thought, that looks like Ray, and didn't think, just got on with what I was doing. And prior to this, I'd made, I don't know if I'd done 2 albums with Dave, or 1, but I'd certainly played on whatever was the first one, and maybe the second one came a little bit after.
So how did that come about? Dave
through Jim.
Oh, I see.
Through Jim.
Because Jim was already in the Kinks by then, was he?
Jim had been in the Kinks for ages. Yeah, Jim left Phoenix to join the Kinks. I looked out, and there was Ray, and he said, we had a chat, but nothing much more. He said, do you fancy recording with us? And I said, yeah, all right. So anyway, the next thing I know, I'm in the studio and putting down the first album, which was Word of Mouth? Word of Mouth, must have been.
Yes, was it?
And he went in every day, put down tracks, didn't know what was going on, didn't know what was happening with Mick. I thought, well, I'm doing what I'm doing, I'll just do it. I thought I was doing it as a session. Didn't even know if it was a Kinks album, really. So eventually, I was asked to do a tour with someone, I think it was Cliff Richard, but it might not, I don't know who it was. And so I phoned up Ray. I said, Ray, have you finished with me yet? Because, is the album, the stuff we're recording, is it over? And he said, why? I said, well, I've got this tour to do, and just want to know that you don't need me anymore. He said, you can't do a tour, you're in the Kinks. So, and that was how it began. And they were the exact words. So he said, come down and we'll go for a drink. So we went for a drink in Dick's, opposite, and that was it. That's how I joined. And then he said, we've got an American tour coming up, now you're in the band. And I still didn't know what to do with Mick. I didn't know how to react. I thought, well, I'll just have to get on with this. So we rehearsed for a day, or one day we rehearsed and did loads of songs, because I had probably 18 years to catch up with by then, or maybe more. And so I rehearsed, and the next day we came back and rehearsed again. There were only going to be 2 days rehearsals for an American tour. And the endings were different the second day. I said, well, we didn't do, because I'd written it all down. And I said, we didn't do this ending. And Dave said, well, we don't do the same ending every time. So I then realised there was no way, there was no point in trying to learn this. I just had to, I realised then it was not a drunken man's gig. I have no idea how the original Kinks, who were drunken men, got on with following Ray, and I'm assuming they never did. They just went, and if they all coincided, that was good, and if they didn't, well, so what? So then we went off to America, and I was still concerned about Mick, because I'd known Mick forever, and he'd been, when I had the drum shop, I'd sold him drum kits, and we knew each other. We were mates. And ultimately, Mick being Mick, once I finally, spoke to him about it, it was, it's all right,
His first gig, let's hear from Bob Henrit on the drum!
And then but I was more concerned about how I got on with not the band, because I knew the band. It was Ian Gibbons, there was a time when Ian Gibbons was going to be in Phoenix, and it didn't happen, and he joined the Kinks instead. And I think he joined roughly the same time that Jim did. And so I knew there wasn't a problem within the band, or at least I hoped there wasn't. But I thought there might be amongst the crew. And we got off to America, rehearsed in SIR in New York, and that was the first time I'd really met the crew. And Bob Szynski, who was doing security at the time, I overheard him. It wasn't a stage whisper, it was an overhear. I overheard him talking to Ray, and Ray said, what do you think? And he said, yeah, he's all business. So I figured, hey, I'm all business, that must be really good. And so it sort of progressed from there. But I never, ever thought that I knew what was coming next, because none of us ever did. There was a piece of paper on the floor that had the tunes on, but it was a book of lies, because often the first one wasn't even the first one, and you didn't know until Ray counted it in what was the first one, which is hugely dangerous. But that was what Ray did. He worked on that, you know.
To keep you on your toes.
Absolutely. Yeah.
So you and Jim are now in the Kinks. Did you bring any origin influence in? Well, it seems to me what you were playing with our gentlemen was immensely complex compared with what the Kinks would be expecting.
It was the intuitiveness, I believe. We talked earlier about the 9/4 bar or the 5/4 bar or the 9/8 bar, or more specifically the 9/16 bar. I won't get too technical here, but you know, and Ray would put another word in, and that would become a different bar. So we did bring the technical ability to deal with that and play along with it, really. But also, I mean, I guess I was fortunate is I could write it down. So when things were changed, take after take, I had the opportunity to mark it on my part rather than think, bloody hell, what did we just do? You know, so I mean, that would have meant train wrecks. So there were some Kinks sessions which were 14 hours long. There really were. But that's not just the Kinks, that's all sorts of bands, you know. And the adage is anything that's done after midnight is not going to be kept the next day. You know, mostly it isn't. You know, and if you think emoting after midnight is good, mostly when you listen to it the next day, it's not as good as you hoped. Yeah.
But did you have input into the song when you got Ray to come along with a new song?
The sound check begins with the drums: bass drum, snare drum, toms, hi-hat. Bass player joins. You've got to play something, so you get into a riff. The next one in is the keyboard player. I don't know if we should go here. Anyway, a lot of stuff was, so for example, we would play, you're going to have to recognise this, but we would play bom bom cha bom bom, dum bom cha bom bom da 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 bom bom cha bom bom. This would be the sound check for me. Jim would leap in and play the same thing, and then Stubbsy would play something else against it, and this never went unnoticed. And so when you ask whether we had input, of course we had input, and it would be a lot would stem from these sound checks. I mean, for example, Ray started doing "You Really Got Me" in his one-man show as a shuffle. Well, that was something that we just did in the sound check, but Ray, nothing was ever wasted. So you can't. Of course, we did have an input, but Ray's very perceptive. I was talking to him about £1 Million Semi-Detached. I said, you know what, Ray? I was reading about this £1 Million Semi-Detached. I said, where was that? It was in the paper. Left it at that, and the next thing you know, there's a song called £1 Million Semi-Detached.
Soon we'll be sitting inside that £1 Million Semi-Detached, detached, in our £1 Million Semi-Detached. Looking back at the past of this £1 Million Semi.
So Ray never ever wasted anything. Ray's a great listener, and he's an observer, and you know nothing goes over his head. You might think it is, but it doesn't, and that's a gift. It's not. I'm not saying anything. I'm not saying it's to do with stealing at all. It's just being very, very observing as to what's going on, and Ray's been very good at that in his life, and it comes out in his songs. I mean, I think that Morphine's song is amazing. The fact that he wrote it when he was out of it, really out of it, and he wrote it.
I'll go cold turkey till I'm clean. I'll go to jail, but you get the morphine. Listen to my heartbeat.
So no, please don't think that I'm berating him here. I'm not. Ray is and will always be a very good observer, and that's the skill. That's the cleverness, you know. Otherwise, he could never. I mean, I was thinking about dedicated follower of fashion this morning. Now, I don't believe that was a phrase that was used in the 60s.
No.
But it was. Somebody will have said it, or Ray would have heard it, or you know. I mean, that's how it is. You just it's things are in the ether, and you grab them or you don't.
He thinks he is a flower to be looked at, and when he pulls his frilly nylon panties right up tight, he feels a dedicated follower of fashion. Oh yes he is. Oh yes he is. Oh yes he is. Oh yes he is. His world is built round discotheques and parties.
You know, it's like coming up. It's like inventing something. If I hadn't invented this drum set behind you, somebody else would have eventually. You know, because that's how it is. Eventually somebody else would have said, do you know what, I want a drum set that goes into 2 bags. Why can't I have it?
That's interesting. Dedicated follower of fashion is now definitely part of the language, isn't it?
And Lola as well. I mean, you know, transvestites are all called Lola. Yes. They weren't called Lola before Ray wrote that song. So he's a great observer, and it's a gift. It really is. He's a very clever chap.
Yeah, Billy Bragg had... She's a dedicated swallower of fascism.
Really? Well, he would have done it.